It was 4:47 in the morning, 90 miles southwest of San Diego, and the Pacific Ocean lay flat and black. A Coast Guard fast response cutter, running dark, cut its engines. Two CBP Blackhawks held position at 2,000 feet, rotors barely audible over the swells. On the cutter's bridge, a tactical boarding commander watched a single vessel through a night vision scope, a weathered commercial fishing trawler sitting motionless on a glassy sea. The scope showed a vessel that looked, to every sensor and system available, like exactly what its paperwork said it was. The trawler's AIS transponder showed routine tuna ground activity. It had been showing that for 11 days. What the transponder didn't show was the 47-foot steel vessel riding 12 feet beneath the surface, tethered to the trawler's keel by a braided steel cable rig, carrying 14 tons of fentanyl precursor and 280 kilograms of finished product. 6 people had been living inside that hull, in a space roughly the size of a shipping container, for the duration of the run. No windows, recycled air, diesel exhaust managed through a snorkel system that kept the acoustic signature low enough to avoid detection. 11 cartel operatives were about to run out of ocean. This is the story of a smuggling method that defeated surface radar for 9 consecutive shipments, a weight anomaly spotted by one Marine patrol officer, and a 73-day surveillance operation that ended with the largest live capture of submarine crew in DEA history. Border Patrol trucks logged the trawler through routine identification checks 4 times in 6 months. Each pass, the surface crew worked the deck, handling gear, running nets, behaving in every observable way like men who made their living from the sea. Dash camera footage from those stops shows officers waving the vessel through after surface inspection found nothing unusual. Catch logs were consistent. Crew manifests matched. What CBP Marine Patrol couldn't see from the waterline is what federal agents' thermal imaging surveillance would eventually reveal. Surface radar reads only what breaks the waterline. The narco-submarine beneath was built around that single fact. The vessel was 47 feet long, constructed from fiberglass over a steel skeleton, powered by 2 low-profile diesel screws that produced minimal acoustic signature, running depth between 10 and 16 feet depending on sea state. A steel cable rig connected it to the trawler's keel at 3 anchor points, letting the submarine hold consistent depth regardless of surface conditions. The crew compartment held 6 operators. The cargo hold ran the full aft 2/3 of the hull. The engineering was not improvised. Federal forensic analysis after the seizure pointed to a Colombian construction team contracted by Sinaloa-aligned logistics managers. Similar hull geometry had appeared in 2 previous Pacific interdictions, both off Central America. This was a known design, refined across iterations, now operating in U.S. coastal approaches. From evidence collection and courier arrest records, federal agents determined that 9 prior shipments had moved through using this exact configuration since October 2025. Not one had triggered an arrest. Not one had been detected. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. 9 successful runs using the same vessel, same trawler cover, same route corridor. At some point, repetition becomes its own vulnerability. The cartel knew that, but the economics outweighed the risk calculation. Each run generated enough revenue to absorb the eventual loss of the vessel. They were running an attrition model. The model broke in February 2026, not because of a signals intercept, not because of an informant, because of a waterline. CBP Marine Patrol Officer Daniel Reyes had worked dockside inspections for 18 years, the last 6 running offshore patrol out of San Diego. On a routine identification pass on February 9, 2026, his patrol boat came alongside the trawler at close range for a standard visual check. Reyes had inspected dozens of vessels in that class. He noticed the trawler's draft line sitting 14 inches lower than it should for a vessel with the reported load and fuel state. Forensic photography from the evidence collection scene tells the story in one frame. 14 inches of hidden cavity, visible only once investigators knew exactly where to look, in a vessel that had passed surface inspection 4 times without suspicion. He logged the anomaly and radioed his sector supervisor. Standard procedure would have been a secondary inspection request filed through the normal administrative queue. Reyes pushed harder. He called the supervisor directly and walked through his read on the vessel's displacement by hand, using the reported fuel state, estimated catch weight, and crew count. The numbers didn't reconcile. It was flagged for follow-up. 3 days later, a DEA Special Operations Division analyst reviewed the flag alongside the trawler's prior crossing history and issued a watch request. The 73-day surveillance operation began on February 14, 2026. DEA Special Operations partnered with CBP Air and Marine Operations and Coast Guard Sector San Diego. The working theory at the start, though, was carrying either a flooded cargo hold or an external tow. The submarine hypothesis came from a DEA maritime analyst in the second week of surveillance after reviewing sonar data collected by a Coast Guard vessel that had made a discrete pass within 2 nautical miles of the trawler's position during a reported fishing run. The sonar return showed a secondary contact beneath the trawler, consistent in position, consistent in depth. Moving with the trawler, they had their answer. Now the question was timing. During the third week of surveillance, analysts began building a profile of the submarine crew's rotation schedule. The trawler made 3 offshore runs during that period, and each time, acoustic monitoring confirmed a secondary contact descending to operating depth within 40 minutes of clearing the 12-mile coastal zone. The submarine crew was disciplined. They ran dark, kept radio silence, and communicated with the surface crew through a pre-arranged mechanical signal system using cable rig tension, 2 short pulls for status check, 1 sustained release for emergency. Federal analysts decoded the pattern from recorded tension data within a week. I spent time going through the surveillance logs from this operation, and one detail kept coming back. The intercept team had 3 separate opportunities to take the trawler during the 73-day window. They passed on all 3. The reason was straightforward and difficult at the same time. Taking the trawler too early meant the submarine crew might scuttle the vessel before it could be secured. The submarine was the evidence. The submarine was the prize. If it went to the bottom, 11 people would be arrested on a fishing trawler with no contraband aboard. So the operation waited. Gathered intelligence, tracked the crew's communication patterns, identified the probable transfer protocol. The trawler would rendezvous with a smaller vessel at a pre-arranged position, the cable rig would be surfaced, and the cargo would transfer at sea before the trawler returned to port. The interception had to happen before that transfer. An obstacle emerged in late March 2026. The primary surveillance asset, a CBP Marine Patrol vessel, was pulled from the operation for a scheduled maintenance cycle that ran 8 days over its projected timeline. For 12 days, surveillance coverage dropped to aerial assets only. The Blackhawks couldn't fly continuous coverage without the marine support structure. The operation nearly stalled. A Coast Guard cutter was reassigned from a Bering Sea rotation to fill the gap. It took 4 days to reposition. During those 4 days, the trawler made 1 additional run to its fishing grounds. The operation held, and the contact was not lost. What's most surprising about this case isn't the submarine, it's that the cartel's counter-surveillance protocol was nearly sophisticated enough to work. The trawler's crew ran electronic counter-detection measures during every offshore run. They monitored VHF frequencies for patterns consistent with law enforcement traffic, and varied their departure times by randomized intervals. They were not amateurs. What they couldn't counter was a man who had spent 18 years learning what a fishing trawler looks like in the water. On April 28, 2026, signals intelligence indicated the trawler was preparing for a transfer run within the next 10 to 15 days. The intercept window was authorized. DEA and CBP began final staging. Here's the take that might get some pushback. The real failure in this story isn't the cartel's engineering. It's that 9 identical shipments moved through an active federal maritime zone undetected. The detection method was one officer's eye. Not radar, not sonar, not AI analysis. One person who knew what a trawler was supposed to look like. The system didn't catch this. One person did. The question that should follow this case: what else is moving through that corridor right now? And is there another Reyes watching it? The tactical operation launched at 02:30 a.m. on May 6, 2026. The Coast Guard fast response cutter moved to intercept position from the southwest. The 2 CBP Blackhawks lifted from Naval Air Station North Island and flew without navigation lights. A tactical boarding party of 12 operators staged on the cutter's deck in full gear: night vision, body armor, breaching equipment, and cutting tools for the cable rig. The trawler had made its run to the fishing grounds and was holding position. 11 crew aboard the submarine and trawler combined. The surface crew on the trawler numbered 5. The submarine held 6. At 4:47 a.m., the cutter closed to 400 meters and activated its lights and maritime law enforcement protocols. The trawler's deck crew made no immediate move. Radio contact was established. The vessel was ordered to hold position and prepare for boarding. What do you think? Did the system protect these waters? Or did it come down to one person's experience that no algorithm could replace? The fast rope teams deployed from the Blackhawks at 04:51 a.m. 4 operators hit the trawler's deck within 90 seconds. 2 of the surface crew attempted to reach the trawler's stern where the cable rig controls were located. Both were restrained before reaching the equipment. A 3rd crew member tried to reach a below-deck compartment. Boarding operators intercepted him on the companionway ladder. The compartment, when cleared, contained encrypted communication equipment and a manually operated cable release mechanism that could have separated the submarine from the trawler in under 30 seconds. Cutting the cable rig from the trawler's keel required specialized equipment and took 11 minutes under active conditions. At 05:03 a.m., with the cable cut, the submarine began rising. It was not a controlled surfacing. The crew inside had no ballast control once separated from the trawler's mechanical systems. The submarine broached the surface at low 05:09 a.m., listing 17 degrees to port. The hatch was secured from outside by boarding operators within 4 minutes of surfacing. The 6 crew members inside were extracted without resistance. All 11 operatives were in federal custody by 05:22 a.m. The submarine was rigged for tow and brought to a federal facility in San Diego. The cargo 14 tons of fentanyl precursor chemicals and 280 kilograms of finished fentanyl.
Street distribution value estimated by DEA at $34 million for the finished product alone. With the precursor capable of yielding substantially more if processed, the vessel itself became the most significant piece of evidence. Federal forensic engineers spent 6 weeks analyzing its construction.
The hull used a fiberglass laminate process not commonly available in Mexican cartel construction facilities. Tooling marks and structural details pointed to a workshop in northern Colombia consistent with contract engineering work previously linked to Sinaloa logistics procurement. The construction team was not identified. They remain at large. All 11 operatives were charged with federal drug trafficking and conspiracy. Prosecutors noted the 9 prior undetected shipments in the indictment. The total volume moved across those 9 runs has not been publicly established. DEA estimates put the figure at over 90 tons of precursor material. The trawler shell company had been incorporated in October 2025. Its registered owner was a person who does not appear to exist. The corporate structure runs through 3 layers of holding companies in jurisdictions that do not share financial records. The financial architecture behind the operation remains intact. Subscribe now. The follow-up drops the moment additional charges are filed, and this case is far from over. The demand for fentanyl precursor on the West Coast did not change on May 6, 2026. 11 people are in custody. 1 submarine is in a federal evidence bay. The engineering team that built it is somewhere. Surveillance monitor walls at the dispatch center still track dozens of vessels running similar routes right now. Comment yes if you think this method is still active. No if you think the network is finished. The network is not finished. The water is the same.